if I'm you, Bob Quinn, I take a drive from Allen Park, right down the street. I take a drive to downtown Detroit, go sit with Ken Holland a little bit. And he'll show you, you'll be seeing the New England Patriots all over again when you're sitting with the Detroit Red Wings. Because they had a guy, speaking of Caldwell, right? They had a guy, I believe his name was Terry Murray.
I remember Terry Murray, yeah.
Brian Murray or Terry?
No, Brian Murray. He was the GM.
Brian Murray. He just passed away, by the way.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah. He couldn't get him over the top. What did they do? They hired Scotty Bowman, a guy that's won rings, right? And what they do? They won a ton of rings.
He's a topper.
And then when he left, David Lewis came along. He couldn't get him over the top. What did he do? He brought in another guy that won a ring, Mike Babcock. So if I'm you, Bob Quinn, go down to Detroit, sit with them a little bit, and follow their format because they groom young players. And when a guy leaves, they got guys that step right in. That's where the Lions need to get. Exactly. That's the West Coast trip was great. It was great. And Mrazek, to me, don't be surprised this guy doesn't win the Vezina this year.
Real quick, you mentioned Dave Lewis. Where is he coaching right now? Does anybody know which Olympic team he coaches for? Which country
France?
he coaches for?
France?
No.
Maybe Russia?
No. Anybody know?
Germany?
I don't know.
Belarus.
Belarus.
He coaches
I would
the
never guess
Belarusians.
that.
Absolutely. The Belarus. They're the red and green of Belarus.
We'll be on the red eye there tonight.
Absolutely.
But the one thing I did notice about the West Coast trip, too, was Mrazek, without saying it, is the number one goalie. There's just...
Sure he is.
And there's just, you have an expensive backup sitting right there right now, but a game against San Jose, he started up that goal to win the game. And...
You're going to have to pay him in the future.
You wonder if the money got to Jimmy Howard because he was a hell of a goalie before he got paid. You got to wonder. You just have to wonder if the money...
But also I think it's a lot of his injuries. I mean, a lot of groin injuries, a lot of those injuries where you're not really the same kind of guy.
Yep.
And it could be the case where every time he's come back from injury, it takes him like a month or two before he even gets back in the swing of things.
But Jimmy was never really Jimmy Howard. I mean, he was good, solid, but remember when he first came up in Maine?
He took us down the stretch against the Chicago to get us to play the Chicago Blackhawks, and we were up 3-1 in that series against Chicago Blackhawks.
Right.
We should have won that series.
Well, we should have won the series, but goaltending and defense let us down in those last 4 games.
Yep.
The problem here is that you got to remember that when Jimmy came up from Maine, that he actually went back down into the minors and got conditioning. Sort of like, remember what Max Scherzer? They were sort of doing like the Jimmy Howard, what happened to Max Scherzer. There was something just a little miss with Jimmy Howard, so they sent him back down to the minors. You're just not cutting it. If you can't beat Chris Osgood, you need to go back in the minors. You're younger than Chris Osgood. I mean, not that Chris Osgood,
Chris Osgood's a Hall of Famer.
Well, absolutely, he's a hell of a goaltender, but my whole point is that he was like 35 years old, 36 years old when Jimmy Howard was getting ready to come up. If you can't beat him from a starting job, my whole point is that Howard wasn't as good as you think.
Here, take a breath.
No.
Take a breath.
No.
Take a breath.
I mean, overall, though,
take a breath.
As we're closing in the All-Star break, as we're closing in the game in Nashville, which is, I think, an interesting format. What do you guys think of that format, by the way? I mean, Jeremy, actually, I kind of like that format. It seems very kind of arcade-ish in terms of from a video game standpoint, but I like this format, actually.
Love that word, arcade-ish.
You know what? The NHL All-Star Game has kind of been a joke. If you will, the past 10 years or so, they can't check, which is a huge part of the game, obviously. And I don't blame them for not checking in a game.
Rightfully so. Like the Pro Bowl is like touch football.
But you know what? The first time I saw 3-on-3 hockey in the regular season for overtime, I was like, oh, this is really good. So I think that it will put fans on edge a little bit. It'll force a few more people to watch, just because it is so exciting and that so many more chances can happen. Who knows? I mean, the games were already outrageously scoring. Who knows what it's going to be now with the?
It's funny you say the All-Star, hockey All-Star game kind of sucks right now. But you know what? When I was 20 years ago, it didn't suck.
No.
Because you know why? You had these guys right here. Right, show that.
The old Wales and Canada conference.
Matt Sundin. I mean, I can go on and on. Sakic. I mean,
Lanny McDonald.
Yeah, I mean,
Messier.
I mean, you can go on and on and on. Hockey has lost so many of these stars that's the problem. If you had these guys playing today,
no, you're missing the other point. They're all Well, now I'm going to sound like an asshole, right? Because I'm going to say they're all European.
Are you doing a Don Cherry thing, Pete?
Well,
I think all All-Star games.
You can relate to these guys. You got to remember, like people like Wayne Gretzky and all that stuff. They came up in the system. People saw these guys coming up in the system. We don't know these European kids until they come over here and start performing.
Is it also too because hockey's become more and more of an expensive sport? I think that has a lot to do with it too. I'm sorry, but that's just like.
Yeah.
So is golf.
Yes, true. But I mean, that's why it's harder to, with Q school and all that to get into golf. But still, I mean, it's maybe the Stars more relatable. We have about 21 minutes left, but I do want to. There's two things I want to touch on the NFL playoffs. But let's talk about where Brendan is going to tonight as they raise number 3 to the rafters.
Pistons are going to win tonight, plus the 7. My lock of the day today.
I like that too.
Pistons plus the 7 tonight.
Yeah, I like
Say that
that
again.
Pistons plus the 7. By the way, I'm 14-6 in my lock of the days.
And by the way, he's won people money. He's I've had people on Twitter send me messages saying thanks, Freddie. So
If you lose, hey, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Bet at your own risk.
yeah, exactly. We have a disclaimer. We are not responsible for you being a dumbass if you put too much on one team. So
No, we're not responsible if you listen to Freddie.
So tonight you got the Warriors coming into town who come off a loss. I mean, but the Warriors kind of
They're going to lose 2 in a row.
we'll see what happens. But the there is a lot of excitement down there tonight. The Pistons lost on a buzzer beater, and Mario effing Chalmers shot. I watched that game live, and Stan Van Gundy was pissed, and rightfully so. There was a lot of bad officiating in the last minute of that game. Pistons came back, did a very good job. Stanley Johnson and Marcus Morris teaming up in the fourth quarter to get the job done. But let's talk about Ben Wallace, the effect that Ben Wallace had on the Pistons. It was a sign-in. It was an afterthought. And us three right here can relate to that, because when that happened with Grant Hill, I was sad Grant Hill left, but then I kept hearing how much of a phony he was, blah, 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 and all that stuff. And I'm like, who's Ben Wallace? And then, a year or two later, became one of the biggest de facto defensive forces. You can debate whether him and Dennis Rodman are the better rebounders, of course, and that's always debatable. But this guy, there's always this, like, well, why are we tiring numbers? Are we the Boston Celtics? But this guy's impact on franchise goes without question.
Right.
What are your thoughts about Ben Wallace?
Yeah.
Ben Wallace, an undersized center, went out and
Undrafted, by the way.
undrafted, undersized, went out, made himself a franchise player. Went out, earned his keep. He rebounded the basketball. He played great defense. He's a guy that people want to emulate after. Between, fear the flow, all this stuff. He got the fans into it. Obviously, he was here in a great part of Detroit basketball history. There's the Bad Boys era, but then there's that, those 5 guys that didn't have a true star, but the way they just played together was so fun to watch. Obviously, resulted in championship, 6 straight Eastern Conference championship.
Credit to Joe Dumars.
The numerous, sellouts as well, and years of consecutive sellouts. Ben Wallace definitely deserves to be having that number raised. He's a franchise player. He was part of, I don't know if it was the revitalization, but the continuing of what was a very good and strong performing organization in the Pistons when he played there.
And I just gave you an example about the Red Wings, Bob Quinn, and the Red Wings couldn't get over the hump with Brian Murray. What did they do? They brought in Scotty Bowman. Well, what did Joe Dumars do? Rick Carlisle couldn't get him over the top. What did he do? He brought in Larry Brown. That's my point on Tom Coughlin. So, and I don't mean to go back to the Lions, but Ben Wallace, I remember when Grant Hill was traded for him, you worked at my little pizzeria. I remember I was cutting dough on the back table, and when I heard the news, I'm like, oh my God, Grant Hill's gone? Because we go back, I don't know if you guys really remember, Grant Hill, dude, he was a star here. And no one talks about him as being...
Remember the series against Atlanta? We talked about this before when I was younger.
Yeah.
He single-handedly almost won that game, but they couldn't be good over Mutombo. But he, on a bad ankle, almost beat the Hawks.
Yeah. And when we sit and talk, when we just sit and talk like this, who's, top 10 Detroit athletes of all time, Grant Hill never gets discussed. People forgot about him because of the impact of Ben Wallace.
Yeah.
If Ben Wallace didn't have that impact, we probably would be talking about Grant Hill a bit more.
I'm glad you brought that up, because he's just like Calvin Johnson. He didn't win, so you might as well ship him out too.
Who?
Grant Hill. They didn't win with Grant Hill, so you might as well ship him out.
To be fair, though,
But they got to the playoffs. But they won playoffs.
Did they?
They won playoff series.
Well, I can't help that Calvin Johnson's part of the Lions. Sorry.
The teal years the Piston teal years are one marked with a lot of. It was a very strange period of time for the franchise, and a period after all that winning success. And they had, the jerseys. You had Terry Mills.
Joe Dumars played with Grant Hill.
Don effing Reed. You know what I mean?
How about the Junkyard Dog?
Yeah,
Huh?
Jerome Williams.
JYD,
to Toronto.
right.
He was a hell of a
Look at
player.
Ben
man.
Wallace's career. He has a franchise record blocks in the season with
Don Reed.
just under 1,500 blocks.
That's my brother-in-law's name, Don Reed. That's kind of funny.
He's number 2 in steals and rebounds all time. You talking about a guy who's going to be hanging in the rafters with the likes of Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, Vinnie Johnson, Bob Lanier, David Bing, and Bill Laimbeer.
Yeah.
I mean, Lanier and Bing are Hall of Famers. Thomas is going to be is he a Hall of Fame already?
Who?
Isaiah Thomas is already in the Hall of Fame, isn't
Oh
he?
yeah.
Yeah.
First ballot.
But those guys are you're going to be in there, and then you got Chauncey coming up on February 10th. Brendan, you got to be pumped. I mean, I'm hoping and praying this is going to be sold out. And
Hopefully he hits that gong.
With all the
Yeah,
weather-
hits that. What do you call? Yeah,
oh, the bong.
Yeah, the bong,
It's a
yeah.
word.
Wow.
He'll be smoking a bong.
I mean, I know it's going to be cold out tonight. There's going to be
Right.
there was a kind of winter advisory thing going on later.
Oh
but,
well. Oh well.
Oh well.
I'm
No,
going.
Yeah,
I'll be
Yeah.
there.
Get the socks. You got to get the socks. You see the socks are coming out. The special
Ooh,
socks.
I haven't.
Yes, there's special socks that are all Ben Wallace on the side. It's really cool. If you get a chance, Google search it.
Yeah.
Or shoot us a text with that image of it. It's pretty cool. And yeah, there's some socks we're giving away tonight. And
I'll make sure I get a pair of those.
and you know what, Ed? I wanted to give a shout out to Ed, who he said said keep up the good work, guys. You're making my morning. So thanks, Ed, for listening.
Thank you,
Crash
Ed.
Davis, who beat the hell out of us.
Who
in
came,
college
by the way, and
football.
I gotta give Ed Davis a lot of credit. He went to Freddie and said, "Hey, Roger, or hey, Freddie, the iTunes feed is really, I can't find any shows. Where do I find them?" So he told Freddie, and Freddie suggested it, and Freddie and I worked out a deal that all the shows now come up on iTunes. It's easier to find. So thanks to Ed and actually both of you guys really for coming up with the Genesis idea. So
Can I ask one question?
What?
I'm going to ask you guys just a yes or no question.
Yes.
We all agree Ben Wallace should have his number retired, right?
Absolutely.
Yes or no on Chauncey Billups?
Yes.
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 No.
No.
wait.
Absolutely
Before we
not.
get to
Thank
no,
you. Thank you.
before we get to the no reason,
But I want to say my words about Ben.
Jeremy,
Go around.
what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on
Jeremy.
this whole thing? I want to get your opinion about this before
Sorry.
we move on.
Talking about Ben still, right?
Yeah, yes,
Yes,
exactly.
thank you. Number 3.
I think the fact, when he went away for a little while, went to Chicago, went to Cleveland, was it too?
He
Yeah,
did
he went
go
to Cleveland. Yeah,
Yeah, after
and then
Chicago.
Boston, I think he finished in Boston before he went back to Detroit.
It just never felt right.
Yeah,
It felt
It
so
was
dumb.
like when Shaq had the Boston jersey.
Yep.
That was so strange. Go
Yeah.
ahead, continue. I'm sorry,
But anyway, I think that showed how good of a player he really was. He was aging. He was towards the end of his career. He still had a big impact on that team. Really helped, start to elevate them again at that point in their season. And I think it's a no-brainer to retire his number.
And what Joe Dumars said, Ben Wallace, you want too much money, you're gone. Bob Quinn do the same thing with Calvin Johnson.
Okay, so Pete, why not Chauncey Billups being the number retired? Why?
Well, first of all, let me say about Ben. First, let me get my thoughts on number 3. Would he come from Virginia Union?
Yep.
Virginia Union, correct?
Virginia Union. So Division 3
Do you
basketball.
have a niece that goes there or anything like that?
No, I have no niece that goes.
Because you got your niece and a nephew go everywhere.
Hey, I can't help. I got
Yeah,
family all over the
spy
place.
backs.
Spy backs
Yeah, you know
everywhere.
what, Freddie, you remind me. The streak of nieces and nephews mentioned on the Pizza Cave is now over.
Oh, well, there you go. Very good. Thank you. See, perfect.
It was a six game winning streak there. Pete.
Anyway, yeah, they say, I see. There you go. There.
Yeah, I keep stats for a reason.
I appreciate that. That's a good stat to keep. How often I mention my family. But number 3 reminded me of number 10. And number 10, even though he's turned crazy and loves North Koreans,
Yeah.
nothing against the American North Koreans. You guys are cool. I'm talking about the crazy
We
leadership
get
over
that,
there.
yeah.
You have to be specific sometimes with these trolls out there. You never know. The thing is that number 3 really set an image for this team. I think it was more Fear the Fro than Mr. Big Shot. I mean, you're asking me about 3-1. Number 3, just like number 10, couldn't shoot a free throw, so everybody was going after number 3 all the time. And even when he was number 6, when he came back as number 6, it was always Hack a Ben and things like that. But there was always one guy. Now I heard Lindsey Hunter on 105.1 this past week. He
I like Lindsay on
was
there.
talking about an experience with Ben, and he really brought up a good point that Ben was the only NBA player during the Shaquille O'Neal time that could handle Shaquille one-on-one. And I think that that's credit enough for him to be sent to the rafters. But for number 1 to be sent to the rafters is questionable. A guy who averaged just under 17 points a game. 17 points a game. Okay?
Lindsey Hunter should be up there before him.
Mr. Big Shot sank lots of big shots.
His number 1 should be up there first.
He did his game, but I reserve retiring numbers for guys who averaged over 20 in our lifetime,
I like
probably
it.
lifetime
I've told
distance, and I
Ben,
guess that
Tommy,
ruins
keep
my
him.
argument for Ben.
I've told him.
But Ben did a lot more for the team, I think, than Mr. Big Shot did.
They're squeezing him in.
A point about Chauncey. Think about the Allen Iverson trade. That's revered
Yes.
as one of the
Oh,
worst
yes.
trades,
Yep.
maybe in NBA history.
Pistons.
No, I don't know.
Jeremy,
You're
that's
right.
a great.